Hello everyone. Today I'm gonna be going over my mage build here. He's a Annihilation Mage, so his main damage skill will be Annihilation. Alright, so let's get right onto the tree first. So I try to focus on getting as much spell damage as I can from the tree, as well as critical hit damage. So here we got 20 spell damage. 20 spell damage, 20% spell damage, 15% spell casting speed score, and 10% damage. Damage is considered a global stat, so it will increase any type of damage, doesn't matter where it comes from. Here we got spell casting speed score plus 10% spell damage again. 20 willpower on hit. This is not as useful since I don't attack with my weapon. It's more of a traveling node. Then we have spellcasting speed score, elemental damage, and occult damage. So this is the most important node. I do have two of the elemental damage types of damage, which is I think lightning and cold. I'm not sure. I'll go over it when I get there. But elemental damage only scales lightning, cold, and fire damage. Occult scales aether, sacred, and shadow damage. So we start traveling up here for the plus 15 spell damage, plus 15 spell damage, and plus 15 spell damage again. Then we come up here for the 10% spell casting speed score, minus 10% spell cost reduction. We got plus 10 health regen, minus health regeneration rate. So this is another, you can say, traveling node. Minus 15% health regeneration. What that does is that your life ticks every 1 second. Your life regeneration. Your life leech also ticks with your life regeneration. So minus 15% reduces that 1 second. So by having this point, instead of life leech and life regeneration applying every 1 second, now it applies every 0.9 seconds. We come down here to get Retaliator. Each point of physical resistance increases all forms of damage output. So anything that you grab from the tree, like this node here, which increases all resistance score, will increase your damage by 0.75 if you only have this one node. I have 0.25 here and another 0.25 over here, so that makes a 1.25 increase in damage for every 1% of material or physical resistance added to my character. So we come down here for plus 15 to all resistance score, plus 15 to all resistance score, plus 10 to all resistance score, plus 10% maximum health, and over here to plus 20% critical hit damage. On this side we got the 20% critical hit damage. I do carry a melee weapon, but I don't attack with it, but it does buff my melee attacks if I were to attack with them, but mainly it's for the critical hit damage. So we got another 20% critical hit damage here, 15 attack damage, that's for weapon again, but I don't attack with it, more for the critical hit damage, which is 10% here, 15% critical hit damage, 10% critical hit damage. And then here, this is more of a traveling node as well. I do get some force shield. I get attack speed score. Attack speed score only benefits my weapon attacks, but I do not attack with my weapons. 15% critical chance score. 15% critical chance score, 15% critical chance score, and this is a pretty big node right here, which gives me 150% critical hit damage, but minus 30% to everything that's not a critical hit. So it'll make all of my other attacks or spell 30% weaker, but it'll buff all of my critical hits by 150%. So my character mainly is focused on the, for critical strikes. Then we come up here for movement speed. This one is cooldown reduction. I don't really need cooldown reductions because I don't depend too much on skills that have a cooldown on it. So I prefer a little bit more movement speed. We come here for the all resist and health, which also scales the damage from Retaliator. And it also gives me plus 5% maximum health. We come over here for the 15% all resistance score, plus 5% maximum health. So that we can get to this side of the tree. So here we get minus 10% spell cost reduction, plus 10% spell damage. So spell damage scales all sorts of spells. Doesn't matter if it's under the occult or elemental. 75% element stack duration. I'm not element based, so this wouldn't really apply to me. But when I do place an element, which I think I have about 3%, it's not much at all, then they will last a little longer. We come here for 15% spell damage and another 15% spell damage. And then here for 20% to all resistance score, which again gives me more damage because I have Retaliator placed here. So this is 1.25% increased damage for every 1% of physical resistance or material resistance. And this is the skill tree setup that I have for a Annihilation Mage. Now let's go over the attributes. I spent all my points into ferocity so that I can get enough critical chance score so I can stay critting as often as possible, considering that if I don't crit as often as possible, I'm not dealing enough damage because of this node right here, merciless lethality. So I put all my points in ferocity, and it gives me 37.5% chance for me to crit. I'm sorry, spell crit chance, not attack. It gives me 43.5 spell crit chance. My bonus attribute is at 70%. This is my combat. This doesn't really apply too much to this character because this combat tab right here is for your weapons. This is not for your spells or your skills. But your spells and your skills do benefit from this area right here. So critical chance and the critical damage also applies to your spells or skills. So all of my skills have an increase of 463% of critical damage. They also have around 37% increase critical chance. My character is a glass cannon. He only has 1,538. He's really good to be playing in groups, since you can stay in the back and pretty much burn everything down from afar. But you can push solo with him all the way up to +4 in expeditions. I've done all the way to the boss in +5 in expeditions. Depending on the boss that I get at a +5, then I'm able to move just one level over. But it's difficult to continue after that because you're pretty much gonna get one-shotted enough times that it's gonna reset the dungeon for you. Okay, so let's go over the gear, and then we'll go over the skills. So for gear, Most of my gear have ferocity on them. So here, and you see the bruiser, I would suggest for you to get bruiser type of gear because it brings the most life out of all the types of gear. So you'll be able to scale your life higher than wearing heavy type of gear. But heavy gear gives you the highest all resistance scores. So it's good for scaling the damage from the retaliator node right here, which increases your damage for every um, physical resistance percent. So it's ferocity into most of my gear. Ferocity here, ferocity there, ferocity there. My gear can have better stats. It's not, this character is not min-maxed. Wisdom here, I can change that shoulder into maybe ferocity or toughness so I can get more resistances and more life. So I will be changing this shoulder, taking that wisdom out. We got ferocity here. We got some fire damage added to attacks here, which we don't benefit. We only benefit from the frost added to spells and the critical hit damage. Also the material resistance score, because that scales retaliator. Here we have Aether added to spells and 20 ferocity, which is what we will benefit the most. We also get some elemental resistances. Here we have Catalyst. I prefer to use a Catalyst and a one-hander. I feel that they give you the most stats for your character to be able to scale the damage, or just more stats overall. Because you can find an offhand and a main hand to have open sockets on them, which will also help you either increase your damage output, or depending on what it is that you want to add to your character. Maybe you want to have your willpower and raid regen be better, or more life, or more to all resistance score like I have here on my chest piece. So all resistance scores is scaling my damage because of retaliator. Ferocity added critical hit damage. I try to get as much critical hit damage and chance as I can get, because that scales your damage. So basically, the way critical hit damage works is that my damage will be multiplied by this amount. So it would be multiplied by 4.63 times. So let's say here my average weapon. So my average weapon is somewhere in between these two. So it's a combination of your attack speed and your damage, which makes an average weapon. But what they're not telling you here, because here it says your average damage rate with weapons and given their damage and attack speed. But what they're not telling you is that this, your critical chance and critical damage, is also included into this. Considering your attack speed as well. So it's multiplying my numbers here times 4.3 every time I crit. So it's giving me an average damage of about that much through my weapons, because this is a combat tab. It only applies to your weapons, but it works the same for your spells. I'll go over the spells in a little bit and I'll show you. And yeah, if you can get two, you can get either two one-handers, or a catalyst and a one-hander. For as a mage, you need a catalyst, but I usually prefer two one-handers, unless your build is specific to either a two-handed weapon. I still gotta upgrade my catalyst, and I still gotta upgrade my mace. I gotta find legendaries for both. Like this one with open 3 sockets will be the best, and if you can find a catalyst with an open 3 socket, will be great too. And ferocity here again with some life, and that's pretty much it for the gear. So I went ferocity on my tree, and I went ferocity focused on my gear, as well as critical hit damage and crit strikes. So I can increase the chance of me critting, and I can increase the damage every time I crit an enemy. Now to go over the spells I have here. The first one here I have Bulwark of Dawn. So Bulwark of Dawn, I use it mainly to buff myself up. So the first one here increases the duration of the skill. The second one grants me resistance to all resistances, so it gives, it makes me more resistant to different types of damage, and it also gives me more damage because I have the Retaliator node. Grants sacred damage to attacks while standing in the area. This also works for some skills. The healing area follows the player it was cast on. So when I cast this skill, it will always follow me. It will stay on me for the duration of it. The second skill we have here is Winter's Grasp. The first modifier I have here is increased area of effect, reduce cooldown, increase freeze duration, and gives a buff that allows you to deal additional damage based on the elements of this skill. Buff is also given to allies touched by this skill. So it means that since this is a cold type of element spell, anything that I deal on the cold damage or frost damage, as it is here, it will be buffed up whenever I cast this spell. So it will also buff my Annihilation skill because it has frost damage. So any gear that you have on that gives you added damage, or let's say if you have some type of added damage socketed into your weapons, all of that gets also applied to your skills. So your skills will benefit from everything you put on. I use Winter's Grasp as a defensive mechanic, so I can freeze them in place mainly whenever they get too close to me. And it also buffs me, so it's a plus. The next one that we have here is Annihilation. This is my primary damage dealing skill. For modifiers, I have increased damage. I have increased beam radius, so it will allow me to hit more than one target if they're close to each other. I have gradually increased damage over time while channeling. So this node right here allows my damage to go from like 7,000 all the way to like 9.5k damage. And grants a second beam, so this pretty much doubles my damage. So if I'm dealing 7,000 damage on a unit, this will allow me to deal double the damage right here. For my fourth skill, I have Aether Jump. This is mainly a traveling skill to get around the map a little quicker, or an escape move. For skill modifiers, I have leave a decoy behind when teleporting. This can help you sometimes because if you teleport out of, let's say, a bad situation or anything like that, there's a chance of the enemy attacking the decoy and taking the aggro away from you. I have casting this ability removes all crowd control effects. So if I'm frozen or anything like that, I can cast this and get out of any crowd control effects. And can be cast multiple times at an increased cost. So I'll be able to cast it around 4 times before I run out of willpower. Now for the last skill I have here will be Anvil's Woe. So this is a melee skill, and why I have Anvil's Woe is because as a mage you need rage dumping ability. So the only way for you to actually gain rage are 2 ways. he's either using a willpower potion or dumping your rage with a rage skill, with a skill that uses rage. So this skill uses 250 rage to be used, which allows me to dump rage as needed. And so these are the skills I use on this character. I really haven't found anything else I can benefit from too much. Or at least this is the best setup I can give him. So this buffs me, gives me more damage. This is a defensive mechanic, so I can freeze them in place. It also buffs my cold damage a little bit. This is my main damage dealing skill. I jump around, either to move around the map quicker or escape, and a rage dumping skill. And that's pretty much for this build. I am going to give you guys a quick run here so that you can see how this character plays a little bit. So normally I'll try to cast Bulwark of Dawn so I can keep it on me all the time and just pretty much beam the crap out of everything. And yeah, sometimes the beam can get bugged and not do any damage, so you have to kind of like wiggle it. Just wiggle it. Well, there goes the lag spike. Okay, that was a fail. Well, like I said, this is a glass cannon, so you just have to stay moving around. Try not to get hit too much. But you are doing a lot of damage. Also, I learned when you face these little ninja guys that they jump at you, open your beam like that and let them run right into you. A lot of the times you will survive, or you might just get a couple of hits, but they will get burned to death. Whoa, almost died there. And it's pretty simple. Just try not to get hit. Beam everything down. Try to keep your buffs up. Your Bulwark of Dawn. It helps you with healing. Gives you more resistances. Gives you more damage. And that's pretty much the playstyle to this character. I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you guys can come up with something better, maybe. If you want to be more tougher, maybe giving up on some critical damage, but then you will lose damage on this character. So if you want to keep the damage, you have to stay with ferocity and as much spell power as you can. But if you're willing to give up some of the damage, maybe you can stasis. The Aether is a good element skill because it plays stasis on your targets, and stasis can slow your target's actions down, which is pretty powerful. So the mobs you're fighting will walk slow, will attack slow, will move slow. So if you're willing to give up on some of the damage, you can probably spec more into the element. You don't necessarily have to like grab more life or anything like that, because it's decently easy as it is, as long as you're dodging around. Just don't stay still in one place, move, and then shoot your beam. Make sure you have enough rage. You don't run out of rage and then the mobs are like right next to you and you can't cast anything, like I did earlier as soon as I came into the dungeon. And yeah, you can probably do elements so that you can have stacks of stasis being applied to your target and slowing them down, helping you either escape or just be able to maneuver around them a lot easier. But you will be most likely giving up on some damage, so you won't be dealing 7 to 9k, but you will be more defensive, more safe. This build is great at being in groups, but it can also be viable, and it could be made into a solo build pretty much. So mobs like the Sadistic Thug, that's where I use my freeze a lot, because it's tough to get away from them. They're running to you and hopping to you. And that's pretty much the playstyle to this character. I hope you guys enjoy. If you like it, please subscribe or let me know in the comments. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. You can check out my Twitch. And I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in another build. Bye bye.